It was really difficult coming up with a list of my top 10 favorite authors, but after thinking about it quite a bit, I finally came up with an order that I'm happy with. So the first thing I decided was, in order to be eligible to be on this list, I needed to have rated at least two of their books 5 stars. If I've only rated one book 5 stars, to me that means they wrote a good book, but they haven't necessarily been able to duplicate that success. And in order to be considered a top author, I need to see repeated excellence. Which, unfortunately, that's going to rule out a lot of the self-pub authors I've been reading simply because I've only read one book by them. Now, some of the other things I was thinking about when I made this list was how many books have they published and how many of them have I enjoyed? How many different series have they written and have I liked multiple series? Because an author that can write 2 series that I really love, I'm going to rate that higher than an author that's only written 1 series that I've loved. I also factored in how likely are they to publish more books in the future. For example, Tolkien and Jordan aren't going to publish another book. So how much do I like what they've published knowing that that's all they're ever going to publish? And then there's someone like Patrick Rothfuss. Will he ever publish another book? Pretty doubtful at this point. Possible, yes, but until he does, I don't have confidence that there's ever going to be a third book, which means all he has to his name is an incomplete series. Whereas other authors, yes, they only have incomplete series so far, but they've been putting out books and they're more likely to complete the series. I also decided I'm going to factor in everything they've written that I've read. So if they've written a graphic novel, i.e. White Sand, I'm factoring that in. Novellas, they're going to count. Now, what I'm not going to do is just take the average rating and place them in that order. I'll let you know what the average rating is, but it's not going to be lowest as number 10, highest rating number 1, because I am factoring in how many books they've written, how many different series they've written, and to what degree I like the book. Not all 5-star reads are the same. Now, with all that in mind, let's get started. At number 10, you have Evan Winter, the author of the Burning series, Rage of Dragons and Fires of Vengeance. So only 2 books, but I rated both of those 5 stars, and from what I'm hearing, book 3, Lord of Demons, is supposed to be out this year. Now, once that book comes out, or if it doesn't come out, those are going to have big impacts on how I rate Evan Winter going forward. He only has 2 books to his name, so if the 3rd book is bad or the 3rd book starts getting delayed and looking like, yeah, he might not be finishing this series, he's going to take a hit. But at the same time, if it's another 5-star read, that's 3 for 3 on 5-star reads, so that's going to be a good indication of what to expect from him going forward. At number 9, you have Bernard Cornwell. He's ran the Saxon series and the Warlord Chronicles. I read all 3 of the Warlord Chronicles and the first one, the Saxon series. I plan on reading more of the Saxon series this year, so that's obviously going to have some impact on where I rate him going forward. So far, of the 4 books I've read, I've rated them an average of 4.5. So 2 5-star reads, 2 4-star reads. And we'll see how that goes as I continue the Saxon series. At number 8 is going to be the first self-pub author on this list, but not the last one. That's Ryan Cahill. I've read 4 of his books, and he also has a rating of 4.5. Now, I was torn on which way to go between Cahill and Cornwell, who should be 8 and who should be 9, since they both had 4 books and both 4.5 averages. But the degree to which I like Darkness and Light, one of my favorite books of all time, really pushed him up over Bernard Cornwell. Now, he also has his 3rd book in the series, Of War and Ruin, out this year that I plan on reading, and from what I hear, that might be even better than Of Darkness and Light, which could move him higher up this list. Number 7 is Sebastian de Castell. This is actually lower than he would have been last year. Last year I had only read The Greatcoats and loved the series. This year I'm reading his Spellslinger series. I'm 2 books in, and it's bringing his rating down a little bit. In total, I've read 7 books by him, including the collection of short stories of The Tales of the Greatcoats, and he has an average rating of 4.29. So when I just read the For primary Greatcoats books, he had an average rating of, I think, 5. I think I rated all of them 5 stars. But the more I read, the more his rating's coming down. But I'm only 2 books into the Spellslinger series and plan on completing the whole series this year, so how that series finishes could still move him back up this list, or it could drop him closer to number 10 overall. At 6, you have Robin Hobb. I've read the Farseer trilogy and the Live Ship Traders, so that's a total of 6 books and average of 4.5. So 3 books have been 4 stars, 3 books have been 5 stars. I plan on reading the Tawny Man trilogy this year, and I often see that listed as the best sub-series of all of Realm of the Elderlings. If that ends up being how I feel about the series as well, that's really going to move her up the list because that's nearly 10 books that I've read of hers. Her average rating will be over 4.5, and it will be 3 different series. At number 5, you have Benedict Jacka. Now, so far, he's only ran the 1 series, so that's kind of holding him back on this list, but that series was 13 books long, including the novella, and the average rating was 4.62, which is going to be the highest average rating of any of these authors. So that puts him pretty much as high as he can go without having a second series that I really love. With that said, he's supposed to be publishing the first book of a new series coming up later this year. So if I really love that first book, that's going to move him into the conversation with the authors that I have above him right now. At number 4, you have Jim Butcher. I've read 21 of his books with an average rating of 4.24. Now, as most of you know, Dresden's one of my favorite series of all time, so that's really propping Butcher up. However, I just started Codex Alera, and I wasn't a big fan of the first book. With that said, I hear the series gets better as it goes, just like Dresden did, and if that's the case, that's going to keep him in this conversation of some of my favorite authors. If I keep reading Codex Alera and it's not working for me, that's going to drop him down. Now for my top 3, we're going to start with Michael J. Sullivan. I've read 16 of his books, and that's counting Riyria Revelations as 3 books, not 6, and he has an average rating of 4.5. So 8 4-star reads, 8 5-star reads. And those are spread across 3 series plus a standalone. Now he has Ezra Harden coming out, and that's going to conclude kind of his world of Elan. He does have some chronicles coming out later, but generally speaking, Ezra Harden is going to connect the Legends of the First Empire, the Rise and Fall, and the Riyria books. And depending on how that lands, that's going to really solidify his spot here. Now for number 2, it's going to be Drew Hayes. He's been my favorite author this year so far. I've read 15 of his books with an average rating of 4.46, and I plan on reading another 5 books by him this year. And how those series have been progressing, I wouldn't be surprised if the 5 books I have left end up being my 5 favorite books that he's written. So that'll put his total up to 20, and that's spread across 4 different series. And unlike the world of Elan or Realm of the Elderlings, where they're separate series that take place in the same world and are kind of connected, all of Drew Hayes' series are completely separate and have nothing to do with the others. And each one I've absolutely loved. So there's a chance by the end of this year, he moves up to number 1. Now speaking of number 1, probably not much of a surprise, especially if you've gotten to this point in the list, and that's going to be Brandon Sanderson. I've read 23 of the books he's written with an average rating of 4.3. Now that's being brought down by White Sand and some of his novellas, and honestly lately I haven't been as big of a Sanderson fan as I was to begin with. I really loved Stormlight and Mistborn Era 1, Elantris, Warbreaker, loved all of those. But Mistborn Era 2, they were solid 4 stars, but they weren't great in my mind. Tress, I actually wasn't a big fan of Tress. And then, like I mentioned, White Sand dragging it down. So depending on what he does going forward, and he has the 3 secret novels coming out this year, those have the potential of knocking him down to either number 2 or number 3 on my list. Yes, he writes a lot, and he has written my favorite series of all time, but it's getting to the point where almost the more he writes, the less I'm liking the stuff coming out. And that's kind of tarnishing the overall rating. But still, 23 books, 4.3 rating. For now, still my favorite author and still going to buy anything Cosmere related that he's putting out. So those are my 10 favorite authors. Let me know in the comments who's your favorite author on this list and who's your favorite author not on this list. And until next time, bye.